What to say? I was lonely and I paid for it. Life was good and my marriage was great. We had two almost grown children and lived a fairly normal life. Then she took it and died. God, how I miss her. Women in their 40s do not die from heart attacks. At least I didn't think so. Now I was all alone. Mary and I were good together, very good. She and her twin sister Barb, and me and my best friend Bill were inseparable all through high school. Damn, those were the times. Bill and I even took a moment to make sure we were with the right girl when we all went out together. They often deceived us. Bill told me about a small red birthmark on baby's butt. It was just above the right buttock. When they tried to trick us, we asked one of them to show us her butt. It was fun as we all struggled to look at the girls' asses. We had so much fun together. We all made sexual innuendos to each other, but as far as I know, we didn't have sex with the other's girlfriend or wife. I say, as far as I know, because Bill and I drank a lot in our early years. The girls always said that they could replace us and we wouldn't notice anything. We truly were best friends. We had a double wedding ceremony. We even went on our honeymoon together. I know this may seem strange to some people, but for us it was normal. We could spend our days with our best friends and our nights alone making love, kind of the best of everything. I know you've heard about two peas in a pod. We were four peas. Barb and Bill had two children about the same age as ours. They also hung out together until they grew up and went their separate ways, but they still remained friends. We had a son and a daughter. Life was good. I was a truck driver and Bill worked as a dispatcher for a large trucking company. Mary and Barb were teachers. What a surprise that they were both teachers. It's a good thing they taught at different schools, otherwise they would have driven the kids crazy because they looked so similar. They taught only part-time until our children went to school. Then they started teaching full-time. Mary always wanted to be there for our children and always has been. The nice part of being a teacher was that she had the same days off as the kids. Of course, I was also there when I wasn't on the road. Throughout my career as a truck driver, I have tried to plan trips so that I don't miss family events. When I had to travel around the country, I tried not to be away for more than 5 days. I think you understand. We were a close, loving family, and Bill and Barb were our closest friends and family. The day I returned from my flight to the West Coast was the worst day of my life. My cell phone rang, and it was my son Ryan. He cried, "Dad, they came and took Mom to the hospital. I think she died." "What? What happened? I can't believe it." I stopped on the side of the road, listening to what my son was saying. Ryan continued, "I got up this morning and was getting ready to go to college. Mom wasn't up yet. I went into her room and called her. She didn't move. Dad, she was just laying there. I shook her, and she still didn't move. I just went crazy crying and screaming at her, then called 911. They arrived in less than 5 minutes. I heard the paramedics talking. They didn't know I was in the other room listening to them. I think they were just thinking. I'm shocked. I heard them say she had no heartbeat. I asked them if Mom was dead, and they said the doctor at the hospital would let us know." "Where are you now, Ryan? I don't think you should be driving." "I'm still at home. I called Aunt Barb, and she said she'd be here in a few minutes. I told her the same thing I told you, and we'll go to the hospital together." I heard my son crying again. "Ryan, I'll drive non-stop. I have to be home in 7 hours. If you can, you should call your sister right now and let her know." "Dad, Aunt Barb just came in. Do you want to talk to her?" He must have handed the phone to Barb, who was also crying. "Jerry, I can't believe it. She's too young to die. Not only was she my sister, she was my best friend," Barb cried. "Barb, I need you to be strong for the kids." I also cried at that moment. "I'll be there in 7 hours. I asked Ryan to call Sheila and let her know. God, this is so hard. I think we all say this would never happen to us," I said through tears. "Jerry, I told Bill, and he said he'd meet Ryan and me at the hospital. I'll stay there with your kids until you get back." She started crying again. "I can't believe this is happening. Why, God? She was such a good person. We said goodbye, and I set off with tears on my face. I had to hold on. There were still 7 hours of driving ahead. My whole life with Mary flashed before my eyes. God must have taken control because I don't even remember how I got home. All I could remember was thinking about my wife and family. About 7 hours later, I arrived at my house. To this day, I honestly don't know how I got there. There were several cars parked near our house. When I entered, my crying daughter was the first to approach me. She got married last year and was pregnant with her first child, a child that Mary will never see. "Daddy, Mommy is dead," she cried. "Why, Dad? Why, Mom?" I cried. I didn't have any answers. Why does God hurt good families? I always hear preachers say God didn't do it, but for me, he allowed it to happen. I really hope there is an afterlife so we can all be together again in this so-called heaven. That's all we could hope for. Of course, this is not the end of Mary's life. There must be a forever place for good people like her. I just hugged my pregnant daughter and told her I didn't know why God allowed this to happen. One day we will see Mom again. We just have to believe in it. What other choice do we have? When Barb came over and hugged me, all I could think about was Mary. I wanted to see if Barb had a birthmark, and maybe it was all a joke or a fantasy. I knew it wasn't true, but when a loved one dies, the mind plays tricks on you. I squeezed and hugged Barb like there was no tomorrow. Apart from Mary, I loved her more than any living woman. After the funeral, I felt so alone. Ryan usually stayed in college. It's good that he was at home that fateful night when his mother died. I wouldn't like to think that she would have been lying there until I returned. Sheila lived a few miles away and came to see me as often as she could. She worked part-time and her husband worked in a law office. He was several years older than Sheila, but was a good man. Sheila worked part-time just to study. She planned to become a full-time mother when the baby was born. She learned this from Mary. I spent more and more time on the road. I had no reason to rush home. I knew my family cared about me, but nothing was important to me anymore. When I was at home, I went to Sheila and was present at the birth of my grandson. Mary would be so proud. Sheila and I cried, thinking about how her mother would react to the birth. Barb was there at birth too. She was like a second mother to Sheila and Ryan. I knew she wouldn't miss this event for the world. She already became a grandmother when her wife gave birth to her son last year. Every time I saw Barb, I imagined Mary. It was so lonely. Barb always hugged me. I know she knew I needed it deep inside. She almost always cried when we hugged. Barb's daughter, Sandy, also attended college. I always wanted my son Ryan and her to become a couple, but it never happened. Ryan told me once when we were talking about this that he loves Sandy, but they spend so much time together that he loves her like a sister. They were already a family. The first year has passed since Mary's death, but I still haven't overcome my loneliness. I traveled more and more. The only real consolation was returning home and meeting my grandson. I also enjoyed dinners at Bill and Barb's. Barb and Mary stuck to old traditions. They prepared home-cooked dinners for their families, not just something quickly defrosted and looking like meat. The hardest part of visiting Bill and Barb's house was seeing Barb and remembering the woman I no longer had. I started going there less often. Another year passed and Ryan graduated from college. He got a good job, but in another state. Of course, I rarely saw him anyway after his mother died. Sandy, Barb and Bill's daughter, got married, and I actually came to the wedding. It was wonderful to see all of our children moving into independent lives. I remember at Sandy's wedding, Bill said to me, "You know, Jerry, we did it. We met two of the sweetest women in this world, remained good close friends, and we both had wonderful children who grew up to be responsible adults. We did it." "Yeah, the only sad thing is that Mary isn't here to see it all," I said with tears in my eyes. "She sees, Jerry. She's smiling from heaven right now, watching from the front row and smiling at Sandy. Here we are, two grown men, both crying. We truly were best friends. Bill reminded me of the pact we made many years ago. that we would all remain friends forever. If something happens to any of us, we will support each other and our families. Life went on as usual, and I was driving to Texas with a load of paper products. I stopped at the parade route, which was along the street where I would be delivering my cargo. A couple of college students came up to my truck and started loudly yelling obscenities at me. "You are to blame for global warming. You have killed thousands and thousands of our trees. You are polluting our environment." What the hell? What were these idiots talking about? I was ready to get out of the truck with a tire iron and get some heads dirty when a police patrol pulled up and told the two idiots to get back on their parade. "Please return to your truck, sir," the officer said. "What the hell is going on? Why did those two jokers attack me?" I asked the officer. "It's the Earth Day parade, sir. You know, save the trees, save the spotted owl. Ride your bike, stop polluting our atmosphere and burning our natural resources," the officer said. "So they blame me for driving a truck and making a living. What is this world coming to? The guy who's trying to make a living turns out to be bad, and these idiots who have nothing better to do think they're good." "Maybe I've been living too long," I told the officer. The officer laughed. "I agree with you, sir, but we are here to maintain order. It would be difficult to fight crime without vehicles." College students kept giving me the middle finger as they marched down the road. I couldn't believe they wasted their time making their stupid posters. How would they have drawn this stupid poster if the tree had not been cut down to provide them with the paper for this stupid poster? I was very glad that my children never participated in these crazy movements. I sat there and read the posters. "Save the spotted owl. Stop exploiting our natural resources. Don't drive SUVs. Electric cars are the future." And so on, poster after poster. Someone had to explain the facts of life to these students. To generate electricity, you need to burn either coal or some kind of fuel. These are our natural resources. Big car, small car, does it matter in the end? What would these children do if someone turned off the heating at their grandparents' place? I think most of these kids need to understand that every truck driver performs a service. Everything we own moves from one place to another by truck, train, or ship. Look, I'm not against nature. I love animals, trees, beautiful parks, fresh water, but here you need to find a balance. What everyone is willing to sacrifice to have something different. Why does every generation think they have all the answers? Oh well, the parade is over, so I can deliver my rolls of paper. I moved in and some of the workers were just shaking their heads at the college students. I would be glad to be unloaded and leave this area. Once I got out of town, I found a decent truck parking lot. There were day rooms and a lounge for drivers who wanted to cool off. I got to my room, and after freshening up, I headed to the lounge. I didn't plan to stay at the motel overnight. I just wanted to wash off the street dirt. I sipped my beer and watched the girls dance. I looked around and saw several couples hugging each other tightly as they danced. I thought about Mary and how Bill, Barb, and I went dancing. After a couple of beers, I decided to hit the road again. I thought I could drive for a few more hours before stopping for the night. I had a sleeping quarters that was my home away from home. When I approached him, I saw a guy with a tire iron walking between the trucks and shouting in Spanish. I thought it might be one of the protesters and prepared for a fight. From a distance, he shouted to me, "Sir, have you seen a girl with dark hair? She is short, maybe 5 feet 1 inch, a little heavyset, but beautiful. She is 20 years old." I realized that he was not one of the Earth Day protesters, but was looking for someone. At least I didn't have to fight him. "There were several Mexican girls in the lounge who fit that description," I replied. "Why are you looking for her if it's not a secret?" "She was my girlfriend. She took this tire iron and hit my car with it. I saw her run across the parking lot. I'll kill her if I see her. She damaged my car." "Calm down, buddy. Don't kill anyone over a dented car. Just call the police and file a report. Give yourself time to calm down." I got in my truck and started it. I heard a noise and looked back towards my sleeping compartment and saw a girl. "What the hell are you doing in my truck?" Please, sir, help me. You heard him. He's hurting me. Just drive, and you can drop me off at the next town. I could see she was really scared, and I could see the guy was still walking around the parking lot with a tire iron. I knew I should have asked her to get out of my truck, but I thought about my daughter. What if it was her and she needed help? I drove out of the parking lot. Okay, sit here and tell me what's going on. Finally, I got a good look at her. The description of her ex-boyfriend was approximately accurate. She was a pretty girl, a little chubby. She had shoulder-length dark hair, wore shorts that showed off her beautiful legs, and her blouse was more like a t-shirt. Nice breasts. I spoke first. You're not one of that Earth Day crowd, right? No, sir. My name is Carlita. My friends call me Carly. The man who was chasing me is Carlos. He was my boyfriend. Why was he chasing you and you actually hit his car like he said? I asked. We broke up a couple of weeks ago. I came home and found him with another woman. I threw a lamp at him and ran out. I went to one of my friends and moved in with her. When Carlos was not in the trailer, Francesca, my friend, and they took my things. And what happened today? I asked. 2 days ago, I turned 21 and my friends threw me a party. We were dancing and having fun when I saw Carlos with this bitch. I got angry and ran to his car and took a tire iron and beat his car. He chased me and I hid in your truck. So what are you going to do now? Where do you live? I live in a small village a few miles from the lounge. I can't go back or I'll go to jail. I have to find somewhere to go. Where are you going? I'm going home to Ohio. You can't come with me. I just have to drop you off somewhere. Don't you have family or friends to go to? Surely they'll miss you. I have 9 brothers and sisters. My parents are poor and cannot afford to support me. I left when I turned 18 and moved in with Carlos. We lived together until I found him with someone else. I have nowhere to go. Please take me with you. Listen, Carly, I need to think. Why don't you go back to the sleeping quarters and get some rest? We'll talk later. I had no idea what to do. Here's this young girl sleeping in my truck as I drive further and further from her hometown. I couldn't just drop her off and tell her to handle things on her own. I'm not like that. What the hell should I do? Damn it, she's only 21 and on her way. She has nothing with her. What the hell should I do with her? Here I am, a lonely old fool with a young woman in a truck. I also needed to rest. I stopped at a rest stop and tried to figure out where to put my head. I looked back and saw her sleeping. I watched her chest rise and fall in time with her breathing. What was I thinking? She was younger than my own children, for God's sake. I tried to sleep sitting up, but I didn't like sleeping like that. I decided to take a chance and go to bed with Carly. After all, it was my bunk and big enough for 2. I climbed back and moved Carly slightly to the side and slid next to her. It's been over 3 years since I slept with another woman. I mean slept, not had sex. After Mary died, I paid women for sex a couple of times. I finally fell asleep when I woke up. Carly snuggled up to me. She woke up a few seconds later and turned around. I explained to her that I also needed to sleep. She said she understood and was glad I didn't kick her out of the truck. I explained to her that I would never do this. We got up and went inside to have breakfast. While we were eating, I asked her a few questions, trying to understand the situation. Carly, what were you doing? I helped my friend clean houses. She gave me $75 a week plus food and housing. Before that, when I lived with Carlos, I worked as a cashier at a pharmacy. I didn't have a car and couldn't get to work after that. How she left Carlos. I want you to call your friend and your parents to see if everything is okay. Let them know you're okay. After she talked to her friend, she told me that Carlos actually called the police and reported the damage to the car. He didn't mention her by name, but he looked for her. When she called her mom, she was told to get a job and take care of herself. She is old enough to live on her own. I couldn't understand how parents could treat their children like that. Carly said that's how all her relatives feel. You have reached the age of 18 and are leaving to build your life. Now I had to decide what to do with Carly. I don't know why I did it, probably because of the years of loneliness after losing Mary, but I invited Carly to come home with me and be my housekeeper. I knew it was a mistake at the time, but loneliness makes your mind work strangely. You won't understand this until you find yourself in this situation. I explained to her that she would be my housekeeper. She will have her own room, and I will pay her $100 a week, so she can buy her own personal things. We'll try this for a while, and if she doesn't like it, I might take her back home on her next trip to Texas. The only other alternative was to take her to the bus station and buy her a ticket back to where she came from. I can't go back. I don't want to go back. I want to start a new life. You are such a good person and treat me so well. I will go with you and be your housekeeper. I have no personal belongings. Could you give me an advance for my salaries so I can buy a few things? There were tears in her eyes, and it seemed to me that maybe everything would work out. On the way to Ohio, I stopped at Kmart and Carly, and I did some shopping. She bought herself almost two of everything at the moment. She was so happy that you would have thought she had won the lottery. I don't know how to thank you enough for everything you do for me. You are such a kind person. Okay, Carly, don't worry. I'll deduct $25 a week from your salary. That way, you'll still have enough each week to buy yourself more personal items. She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, thanking me for my help. We drove home, not talking much, but listening to my CDs. I knew I would get a lot of criticism from my family. I was preparing for a barrage of questions, which are likely to follow. They, my family and friends, just don't understand what it means to be alone. I decided that Carly and I would get settled and I would contact my daughter tomorrow. When I pulled the truck up to my house, Carly couldn't believe how nice it was. I lived in the country and had a large area to park my truck. When we walked into the house, Carly was as excited as a schoolgirl. Of course, it wasn't that long ago for her. You must be rich. You have such a beautiful house and such furniture. It is so sweet. My parents live in a big old house. I only lived in trailers next to my parents. This house is so big and beautiful. You have everything, she said. Carly, I'm not rich. I'm not even rich. I live like most people. I've been paying for this house my whole life. I haven't bought anything since my wife died. I spend most of my time on the road. That's why I asked you to become my housekeeper. You can live here and your job will be to keep it clean. Just respect my space and keep it clean. So, do we have a deal? Carly was jumping up and down like a child with a new toy. She came over, hugged me, and kissed me on the cheek again. I showed her the room that belonged to Sheila before she got married. When Sheila left, she took all her personal belongings with her, but the room was still decorated like a girl's room. Carly took her personal items that we had bought, put them in drawers, and put a few things on the dresser. It was my pleasure to help this young woman. I didn't know if I'd get in trouble seeing her prancing around the house. She had such big breasts and a beautiful ass. I ordered pizza for dinner, and we watched TV. Carly said she had never had it so good, and that made me feel very important. Later, I took a shower and told Carly I was going to bed. I told her to make herself at home, and if she had any questions, she would just ask them. After the shower, I went to my room and lay down there. I heard the shower running. I'm guessing Carly was taking a shower. This went on for quite some time. I think she liked to take long showers or didn't take showers all the time. About 10 minutes later, there was a knock on my bedroom door. "Come in," I said. I was under the covers, but I was only wearing underwear. "Jerry, can I talk to you?" Carly asked. She was wearing red doll pajamas. I could tell she wasn't wearing a bra, and I was pretty sure she wasn't wearing panties under her pajamas. "Of course, Carly, what is it? Do you need something?" She came and sat on the edge of my bed. I saw that she was nervous. "I want to thank you for everything. They brought me here, bought me things, and gave me a job." "It's okay, Carly. I just wanted to help you." She leaned over and kissed me on the lips. I was a little confused, but it was so good. "Carly, you don't have to." "I want to. I want to make love with you. I know that you want me too. I saw it in your eyes, she said. I thought it was wrong, but it felt so good. I just let my passions take over. I felt alone and alone. There was a beautiful young woman here who wanted me. It's not every day that young women walk in on old men like me. I kissed her back and hugged her. We had sex. She got off me and headed back to the bathroom to clean herself up. I lay there confused, wondering how it all happened. In the end, I decided to hell with it. I was a widower and Carly was an adult, albeit young, and we decided to have sex. I really didn't owe anyone an explanation. Carly came back into the room, put on her pajamas, and lay down next to me on the bed. I turned off the light and we went to bed. The next day, it was a whole new ball game. Being close to Carly changed that. She didn't seem to mind, but it bothered the hell out of me. I called Sheila to talk to her. I mentioned that I hired a housekeeper. Sheila thought it was a good idea. She told me that now she won't have to constantly come and clean my house while I'm away. Then she asked how it happened. I told her, and she almost blew her stack. Dad, are you crazy? You hired a 21-year-old girl to come live with you and clean your house. God, Dad, I can't believe it. What were you thinking? Dad, I know it's none of my business how you live your life, but you haven't thought this through. Honey, I know it was an impulsive thing to do, but at that moment I wasn't sure what to do. I'll only be here a few days a week. We're going to try. I can't ask her to leave now. Please try to understand. Come tonight and meet her. Bring my grandson here so I can see him. I miss this little guy. Okay, Dad, we'll come over and meet your new housekeeper, but we make no promises. Thank you, honey. That's all I can ask from you. I'm sure everything will be fine. Even though I had doubts about it, I had to think positively. I called Bill and Barb and invited them too. Barb reacted much the same way as Sheila. She also called me several names, telling me how stupid I was. It was very tense when they all arrived at the house. I told Carly to expect something, but she didn't seem to care. She told me that her whole life is built on tension. This was nothing new. Barb gave me the third degree by asking when I became so stupid. Jerry, I love you more than anyone, but how could you be so stupid? The girl is 25 years younger than you. What in God's name were you thinking? Then Barb said something that I couldn't believe came out of her mouth. I can tell by the look on your face that you've already fucked her. I hope you took advantage of the protection. All you need now is to impregnate her to really ruin your life. I was very glad that she didn't say that in front of everyone. I didn't use condoms. I was hoping Carly was taking her pills. Of course she was, since she never had children and lived with Carlos for 2 years. Everyone thought Carly was fine except the women, Sheila and Barb, who said they didn't really trust her. They said they liked her, but why would a young girl like her want to live with an old man like me? It didn't do much for my ego, but they had a valid point. Dad, Sheila said, I think she's amazed to see everything you have. After talking to her, I think she had a bad upbringing and had to fight for everything she has. To be with you, she probably thinks she won the lottery. The problem is how you deal with it. Just be careful, Dad. Bill and I were talking, and he kept laughing. She's very young, Jerry. I can understand this attraction. A young girl is in trouble, and you save her. Have you had sex with her yet, good buddy? You know this will happen. An old fart like you and a young bitch like her. Sooner or later, it's bound to happen. Just be careful. Carly acted like it didn't bother her. She answered every question anyone asked. She told them that I was her hero and saved her from her old boyfriend. She explained that we agreed to give it a few months and see what happens. Thank God she never told them we had sex the night before. After everyone left, I called my son, who now lived in Michigan. He was single and dating. He told me almost the same thing as everyone else. I didn't have the courage to tell everyone how many times I had thought about suicide over the past 3 years. I'm driving down the road and just roll off a cliff. If it hadn't hurt my kids, Barb and Bill, I'm sure I would have done it one day. Carly changed all that. I didn't love her, but I wasn't lonely anymore. We had sex every night I was home, which was about 2 days out of 7. Usually, I would go on a trip for 5 or 6 days, and then come home for 2 days and leave again. Carly said that when she wasn't cleaning, she spent her free time shopping and making young friends to hang out with. I wasn't too happy about it, except that she said she never brought anyone to the house. I learned that her friends were Mexican girls who hung out in the city bars. 4 months passed, and I returned from one of my trips when Carly said she wasn't feeling well and went to the doctor. And so, she was pregnant. God, I felt like the roof had fallen on my head. How far have you come, Carly? In 4 months, what are we going to do? I didn't plan to have a child. I'm not married. My parents will kill me. What should I do? I thought you took a pill. Yes, but Carlos talked about us starting a family, so I never renewed my prescription. For God's sake, why didn't you tell me? Would I use protection? You are 46 years old. I didn't think you could still have children. I didn't know. Wow, now I'm starting to understand what the problem with the age difference is. I needed to do something with the child, but what? I thought about abortion, but I could never imagine killing an unborn child, especially my own. Are you going to marry me, Jerry? Marry you? Carly, we're not in love. We're just two people who had sex and had a baby. I had to wonder if the baby was even mine. The timing was iffy at best. Let's wait and see how things go. I will pay all medical expenses. I need time to think about it. I love you, Jerry. I want the best for the child. I don't want to be an unmarried mother trying to raise a child alone. You should marry me, Jerry. I will be a good wife. We will be a family, and we will raise our child. We already live together and make love all the time. I needed to talk to someone about this, but who? I decided to call my brother-in-law, John. He would know more than most since he was a lawyer. I need good advice now. Of course, as soon as I called him to talk about business, my daughter immediately called me back. What's the matter, Dad? John said you called him on business. This must be something you didn't want to talk to me about. My first guess is that it has something to do with Carly. She's pregnant, isn't she, Dad? God, how do these women figure all this out? It's like a second sight or something. Yes, Sheila, Carly is pregnant. I called John to find out what my legal options were in this matter. I could scream at you, Dad, but it's too late. You can't think about marrying her. You are digging a hole from which it will be difficult for you to get out. Dad, you're a lot older than her. Hell, she's younger than me. Honey, I know that. If your mother were here, she would know what to do. Dad, if Mom had been here, none of this would have happened. God, I still miss her. Me too, honey, but I have to deal with this new situation. I know Carly is young, but she makes me happy and less lonely. I know I'm much older, but I'll make a good father. Look how good it is. My children were the best, and Sheila was a great mother. Dad, I just want you to know that no matter what you decide, I will always be there for you. You know, I'm still your little girl, at least for a little while longer. About an hour later, the phone rang. I answered, and it was Barb. What the hell did you do just now? I might just kill you. Oh my God, Jerry, what came over you? You don't come to us anymore, then you bring home a strange girl and get pregnant from her. Now you're thinking about marrying her. What happened to the sensible Jerry I always loved? I just can't believe what happened to you. I was angry. I jumped on Barb. It was something I had never done in my life. I was always worried about hurting her feelings. Barb, no one knew how lonely I was, always alone. I have only loved 2 women in my life. One is dead, and the other is married to my best friend. My life is crap right now. Yes, I have made a few mistakes, but I am doing my best to correct them. Because of my loneliness, Carly is pregnant. Yes, she's still a child, but I have to realize that I'm going to be a dad again, and I just can't throw money at her. I could hear Barb crying on the other end of the phone. I didn't quite understand why she was crying. I wasn't sure what I was screaming at her, but something hit her. Jerry, I have to go. Bill and I will always be your best friends. If you need us, just call." She hung up. I went to talk to my brother-in-law, John. I wanted to meet him in his office because it was a business, and I needed to have a clear mind. John gave me a lot of useful information, and I made all the decisions. For some reason, I felt like I had to tell Barb. I know she didn't mean to agree with me, but I just felt in my heart that I should do it. Bill, her husband, was at work. I wanted to be alone with Barb when I told her this information. I thought about telling Sheila, but I advised John to tell her gently. "Barb, I have to tell you something. I know from the very beginning that you will not agree with me, but I have to do what I think is right. You'll marry her, won't you, Jerry, on a girl young enough to be your daughter? Why, Jerry? Please tell me why. I know deep down that this is a big mistake, and you will probably pay dearly for this." I was a very lonely person. I thought about killing myself several times, but I never did it because of my children. Our child is born. She was a beautiful little girl with dark curly hair. Sheila and Barb arrived at the hospital and waited with me. I actually assisted in the birth of my little girl. We named her Maria. Carly liked the name because she thought it was Spanish. I liked it because it sounded like Mary's name. We took her home from the hospital, and I couldn't believe how much I wanted to hold her in my arms. She was such a tiny, sweet, innocent baby. I was so glad I was keeping it alive. I would hate the thought of this little person never being born. I loved her so much. A couple of things I need to talk about. Right after Carly told me she was pregnant, I had a vasectomy. I didn't want to be responsible for having another child. At that time, I also took a DNA test so that I could compare the results with Maria. After I held this little girl in my arms, I wanted her to be mine. God, let her be my daughter. About a month later, I received Maria's DNA results. It was one of the scariest days of my life when I went in and got the results. Maria was my daughter. I cried right in front of the doctor. He patted me on the shoulder and said, "Congratulations, Mr. Davis." I couldn't be a happier person. I never told Carly about any of the tests. I wanted her to believe without a doubt that Maria was my daughter. I went home, hugged my little baby, put her to bed, and then went to have sex with her mother. A couple of things I didn't like about Carly, or more accurately, that she didn't do. She didn't want to breastfeed Maria. This bothered me because I thought it was some kind of bonding ritual between mother and daughter. Of course, I'm a man, and there wasn't much I could do about it. Another thing was that she didn't seem motherly around Maria. Sure, there were times when she seemed caring, but most of the time she didn't pay much attention to her. Perhaps it was a new generation of mothers, or perhaps it was just Carly. I started driving local routes so I could be home almost every evening. I wanted to be close to my daughter. I also tried to visit Bill at his home almost every day. Cancer was taking away his strength. He was undergoing chemotherapy, which was supposed to target the cancer and try to kill it slowly, or at least give it a little more time. He told me that sometimes when he returned home, he felt worse. Barb and his son and daughter were always by his side. I felt so sorry for them all. I tried to hold on, but it was difficult. I even brought Maria to him. She reminded him of our daughters when they were that age. Memories were everything to Bill. This is all he had left to take with him, and all he left for us to appreciate. About a month later, I received that fatal call. Bill was on his last legs and in the hospital. I couldn't believe that Carly was mad at me for going to Bill's. She thought I should stay home with her and the baby. The more I saw this side of Carly, the less I liked her. I walked in and said goodbye to my lifelong friend. The last thing he said to me was, "Remember our agreement?" And his family looked at me. I was sure they all knew what it was about. After the funeral, I had to leave. I decided to go to California, which would take more than a week. Carly asked if she could come with me. Maria was 3 months old, and Carly thought I could take her to Texas so her family could see the baby. It had been a year since she had seen them, and I thought it might be helpful for her. Perhaps she was homesick, and that's why she's been acting strange lately. She talked to family and friends on the phone all the time. I should have known this since I was paying huge phone bills. I ended up buying her a cell phone with unlimited long-distance calling. It cost a little more each month, but saved me a ton of money in the long run. I checked in with Barb to make sure she was okay, remembering our agreement. I went to Sheila and told her how long we would be gone and hugged my grandson. He is already 4 years old. God, how quickly time flies. When we got into the truck, Carly's mood already seemed to change. She seemed happier. Perhaps this trip really was a good idea. We drove down the highway, and I put on one of my country music CDs. It was probably my favorite music other than the good old hits. Not long later, Carly put on a CD with some unknown band. It sounded more like an instrument tuning than a song. I didn't want to argue, so I just turned down the volume a little. As I drove into Texas, I thought about the people celebrating Earth Day, or whoever they were. It must have been the same week, but a year later. They had signs everywhere. When I saw a sign that said, "Save the Spotted Owl," I actually started looking for an owl to run over. I didn't know why people like that irritate me. Carly gave me directions to her parents' house. It was a rather run-down house in a not very nice area. I had a hard time finding a place to park my truck. After parking, I grabbed the suitcases and bags with things for Carly and Maria and carried them to the porch. Carly's mother came out to meet us. She didn't seem very friendly. Several of Carly's siblings were there too. They seemed a little friendlier. I introduced myself, had a cup of coffee, chatted a bit, and said goodbye. I had to go to California and make a delivery. Then I had to pick up the shipment in New Mexico. I told Carly I'd be back in 2 days. He kissed her lightly and then hugged and kissed his little daughter. I knew I would miss Maria. She was my pride and joy. A couple of days later, when I picked up my family, I was not greeted in the best way. It was a strange feeling, as if I was in a place where I didn't belong. No hugs, kisses, nothing from my relatives by marriage. Maybe it has something to do with our ages. I really didn't know. I was happy to have my little Maria back in my arms. I loaded the truck, and we hit the road again. Carly seemed lost in thought. I asked her if she enjoyed the visit, but all I got was, everything was fine. I asked her what her family thought of Maria, and she said they thought she was cute. I knew something was wrong, so I just asked Carly straight out, "What's the problem?" No one in their right mind would say that Maria is just being nice, especially her grandparents. "What's wrong, Carly?" They said I should have married a Spaniard. They think Maria is the child of a mixed marriage, and that I should leave you. Are you kidding? They think we're a mixed marriage? What bastards they are. I don't care if they're your parents. I'll never bring Maria there again. I wanted to go back and strangle these people. They could hate me all they wanted, but speaking ill of Maria was crossing the line. She never asked to be born and never harmed anyone. I would do anything to prevent anyone from harming her. That was my job as a parent. After that, everything calmed down. When we got home, I sat on the couch and held my daughter. She looked into my eyes and smiled. She knew that I was her protector. Our marriage became strained after that. He wasn't that good to begin with. One day, I received a call while I was on a short trip. It was Sheila. "Dad, almost every time you leave, Carly leaves Maria at my house. I don't feel sorry for her. I love that little girl, but I know something is wrong with Carly. After she leaves Maria, she's going out with her friends. Dad, that's wrong." "Oh, God. Thank you for calling, honey. I'll handle this. Please keep Maria if Carly tries to take her. She's been acting strange since we got back from Texas a little over 2 months ago. I'm pretty sure our marriage is falling apart. The only thing that matters now is taking care of Maria." I hung up and was furious. I noticed several things were missing from the house. Some of them belonged to Mary and were never removed or given away. The women in the family had already taken the memorabilia they wanted. If Carly wanted one of Mary's things, all she had to do was ask, and I would give it to her. Now I felt like she was stealing from me. What kind of woman would steal from her husband? One day I came home early and saw Carly getting ready to go out. I knew I had caught her off guard as I wasn't supposed to be back that evening. I told Carly that we needed to talk. I asked her about the exits. She said that she was bored and that she wanted to go out with her friends. She just had lunch and went to the store and bought a couple of things. They were going to have fun tonight. I took her completely by surprise. What's really going on, Carly? Your cheating days aren't over. I found pregnancy test results in the trash. So, you're pregnant again. Who's the father this time? Of course you are. I haven't made love to anyone but you since we met. Bullshit. Stop lying. We never made love. We just had sex. Neither of us ever put love into it. You probably got pregnant when we went to Texas. Who was it? Carlos. Or someone yet. Don't you dare put this on me. You have an hour to pack your things and get out of my house. I hired someone to follow you today. You can go back to the motel with Carlos and your other friends. Yes, I know you cheated on me. I just needed proof. You provided it. It's in your stomach. We argued for an hour. At first, she denied everything. Then she began to blame me, and when she said that she would take Maria, I began to throw her things out the door. I told her to get a lawyer, and we will fight in court. I would rather die than let her take my little girl. She reached for her phone. I knew she was calling her friends to come pick her up. She gathered her things and threw them in plastic bags, and when her friends arrived, she threw her things in the car and said that she would see me in court. She wanted to take away everything that rightfully belonged to her. I called John and told him what happened. He surprised me by saying that he already knew and would come to talk to me. I remember telling him that I would never give up Maria. He said he understood and everything was under control. I was excited when we walked into the judge's office a few days later. Most judges tend to side with the mother. There was no way I was going to let Carly take my little girl. When we walked into the judge's office, we had a female judge, I saw Carly, and a man I thought was named Carlos. I saw him once in the parking lot, and her lawyer, looking at me smugly. I looked at John for some hope. Don't worry, Jerry, everything will be fine, John said. I remember Sheila telling me that John was one of the best divorce lawyers in the area. I hoped she wasn't just praising him because he was her husband, and that he was actually good. The judge began the hearing by asking if everyone was present. John said he has another witness coming soon, but we can get started. So, said the judge, we have a dispute here about custody of a 6-month-old girl named Maria. We also have a problem with the fact that the wife is pregnant again. The husband claims that the child is not his, so there will be no problems with custody, but the wife is asking for alimony for both children, the daughter and the unborn child. And lastly, we need to consider the division of property and who will pay for medical expenses during pregnancy. Is everything correct, lawyers? Both sides nodded in agreement. Well, let's start with custody of Maria. It should be noted, from this point on, I slightly changed the dialogue in the courtroom. It was difficult to remember everything that was said on both sides, so this is kind of a synopsis of what was said. John stood up. John Bryant for the defense, Your Honor. I have a witness in the foyer who is willing to testify on behalf of my client, Mr. Davis. Linda DeMarco has spoken to the plaintiff many times about her marriage. May I invite her, Judge? After the judge nodded, John brought in a pleasant-looking Spanish woman in her 20s. I had never seen it before and wondered where John found it. I looked at Carly, and she was amazed to see Linda. She screamed, Linda, how could you betray me? I told you this in confidence. Please remain silent, Mrs. Davis. This is my judgment, and I will give you the floor when I see fit. DeMarco, what can you tell us about the child, Maria, that we don't already know? Asked the judge. Your Honor, Carly, this is Mrs. Davis told me that she doesn't know who the father is. She told her husband that the child was his, and she also told her boyfriend, Carlos, that the child was his. Let's leave it at that, the judge said. I think we need to know who the father is before we can decide on custody. Mrs. Davis, who do you think the father is? Keep in mind, if you don't think it's Mr. Davis, then he won't be obligated to pay you child support. And of course, Mr. Davis, if this is not your daughter, I can hardly give you custody. Carly looked dumbfounded. On the one hand, she wanted to receive maintenance money if she was given custody, but on the other hand, she could lose her boyfriend. He probably won't accept someone else's child, especially after he's been told it's his. John stood up. Your Honor, if I may, my client, Mr. Bex Davis, took a DNA test shortly after the baby was born. Here are the test results that prove he is Mary's biological father. John handed the document to the bailiff. The judge spoke. Well, it helps with the first child, but how can you prove that the second child is not his? Your Honor, Mr. Davis had a vasectomy immediately after he found out that Carly was pregnant for the first time. He never told her about it. Of course, they weren't married at the time, so he had no obligation to tell her. So, Your Honor, this proves that she had an affair to get pregnant a second time. DeMarco is here to confirm that Mrs. Davis told her that the child was conceived as a result of the affair. John gave the test results to the bailiff. What do you say to these charges, Mrs. Davis? It appears you have not informed your lawyer of these charges. Carly's lawyer stood up. Judge, I'm James McCoy, representing the plaintiff. Mrs. Ray Davis says it was a casual affair. She didn't want to get pregnant. Also, we agree that he is not the father of the unborn child. We simply want custody of Mrs. Davis' daughter. Mr. President McCoy, we don't need a lot of lawyer talk. I need the facts so I can make the right decision for the welfare of this child. Where will your client live, and what will she do if she is given custody? She wants to go back to Texas and be with her parents. I have letters from them saying they will help raise the child. As for finances, we were hoping for decent alimony and, of course, child support. John stood up. Judge, they can't take a child out of state without my client's permission, and I can assure you that permission will never be given. On the other hand, if my client gets custody of his daughter, he will live here his whole life. He has everything he needs to raise a child. But most importantly, he has family and friends who have written letters saying that they will all help in raising the child. You're right about in-state residency, lawyer. Mrs. Davis, are you willing to live here in Ohio and raise the child if you are given custody? It's not fair. Just because he has money, he dictates terms. I don't want to live here. I should have the right to see my daughter. It's just not fair. On the issue of custody, I find in favor of the defendant, Mr. Davis. I also order that Mrs. Davis has the right to see her daughter every other weekend. I am concerned about the possibility of Mrs. Davis taking her daughter out of state, so I order that her visits be supervised by either a member of Mr. Davis's family or a court-appointed person. The supervision fee will be paid by Mr. Davis. Carly was angry. I knew she was angry about the money, not about Maria. Carlos, on the other hand, seemed slightly pleased. I guess since Maria wasn't his, he didn't want her around. Now, regarding the division of property, I have before me a prenuptial agreement signed by both parties. Mr. P. McCoy, is there any reason why I should not follow this agreement? Your Honor, my client says she signed it under duress. If she had known she would be left with nothing in the event of a divorce, she would not have signed. You must remember that she was in a foreign state, alone and pregnant, and she was used by a much older man. Mr. Vice Bryant, is there anything your client would like to say about this forced signing of this document? Your Honor, I was the lawyer who drafted the prenuptial agreement. No one was under pressure at the time. That's why prenuptial agreements exist, to preserve the assets of both parties entering into a marriage. I will also add, Your Honor, that this marriage only lasted a year before Mrs. Davis cheated on her husband, if this was the first time. Also, Your Honor, my witness, Miss DeMarco, would like to speak on behalf of my client. I can assure you that this will help make a decision regarding the division of the property. Please, Miss DeMarco, what can you add to the division of property? Asked the judge. I am a fact-finding investigator and was hired to do a background check on Mrs. Ursa Davis and her friend Carlos Hernandez. They are scammers. They scam people and resell stolen goods. They are from Texas. I will give you evidence of what I am talking about. Mrs. Davis forged a credit card in Mr. Davis's name and racked up over $20,000 in debt over the past year. Most of them are cash advances. I don't think Mr. Davis was aware until now. Because Mr. Davis trusted her, he never suspected anything. She made the minimum payments every month so that Mr. Davis would not be in the know. She also began taking items that belonged to the late Mrs. Mary Davis. She told me personally that he never finds out, since he probably didn't know that she even owned it. All this time, Mr. Davis continued to give her $100 a week for personal needs. He bought all the necessary items for the house and the child. God knows how much more she would have stolen, if only she had more time. The judge reviewed all of Linda's evidence. I was completely stunned by what I heard. John gave me a copy of the bank statement to show how Carly had been defrauding me. I actually had tears in my eyes. I was just a lonely man who slept with this young woman. I had no idea that she wanted to take everything I had from me. The judge was ready to make a verdict on the division of property. Mrs. Davis, you are the worst kind of person there is. You should be imprisoned and answer for your crimes to this man, taking advantage of a lonely grown man and trying to take everything from him, including his child. You are a disgusting person. Unfortunately, I can only judge based on the evidence presented to me. You, Mrs. Davis, will leave with the clothes and personal effects that you now have. You brought nothing into this marriage, and with that you will leave. As for the money you stole from Mr. Davis, he must file a theft report with personal information against you to get your money back. If this case comes to my court, I will make sure that you are imprisoned. I am also changing Maria's visitation schedule to once a month for 2 hours for 1 year. Mr. Davis, you are still married to Mrs. Davis and will be responsible for the medical expenses of her unborn child until DNA testing is completed. Test to confirm you are not the father. I can't just accept the vasectomy even though I believe it was done. At least your health insurance will cover the cost of the birth. If there is nothing else to go to court, the case is closed. I made my decisions. I was very happy. I hugged my brother-in-law, and his friend Linda hugged me. I wanted to know more about her, but John said they had another meeting and they would see me later at his and Sheila's house. I went home feeling pretty good. I can't believe Carly would do this to me. You think you know a person, and then it turns out that you are not even on the same level. At least I got custody of Maria. I didn't care about the cost. I just wanted my little girl to stay with me. I called Sheila and told her the good news. I felt her smile through the phone. She was a wonderful daughter, and despite all the stupid things I did, she was still willing to help me. Dad, you need to come over in a couple of hours. We need to discuss something. Is Maria okay? I asked. Yes, Dad. It's just a few things we need to discuss. I don't want to talk about it over the phone. Please come back in a couple of hours. Okay, honey, I'll come. We both laughed because that's how I always answered her mother. She realized this pretty quickly. When I arrived at Sheila and John's, I couldn't believe how many cars there were. I parked and walked into the living room. Barb sat there in nice trousers, rolling a ball towards Maria. I said, "Hi, honey," and Maria started crawling towards me. She was almost 7 months old, but she seemed so smart. I know a lot of parents say that about their kids, but I really meant it. I picked her up, and she said, "Yes, yes." I hugged her and kissed her. She didn't care that I was old. She knew that I was her dad and protector. That was enough for me. I looked around as everyone began to enter the living room and adjoining kitchen. I saw a woman, Linda, sitting there talking to John. I finally found out who this woman is who helped me save my daughter and my dignity. I looked back and saw another person entering the room. It was my son Ryan. He must have come from Michigan. I was almost in tears seeing all the people who meant the most to me. I walked up and hugged my son. "Hey Ryan, have you said hi to your little sister yet?" We were guys, and I wanted to tell him something unusual. "Yes, Dad, I've been here all day. My sister and I have become best friends," he said, taking Maria into his arms. Okay, that's it. I give up. What's going on here? Is this a party or something? Ryan spoke first. It's an apology party, Dad. I don't understand. Why apologize? I asked. Let me try to explain, Uncle Jerry, Eric said. After Aunt Mary died, we all kind of went our separate ways. I have to say, everyone except Sheila. She was there for you the most. We weren't there to support you. You spent a few years alone. We had to be there, but didn't. After you got married again, we all realized that it was because we weren't there. We decided to do something. We wanted to make sure that Carly was a woman who was worthy. We found out the truth about her and decided to let her know that we are aware of her secret, but you got ahead of us. I don't quite understand. If you knew something, why didn't you tell me? I tried to tell you, Dad, but you said you wanted to do what was right and marry her. The only way we thought you'd listen to us was if we had real proof. You always give second chances, Sheila intervened. Dad, it's time to meet Linda, Ryan said. The young woman stood up and held Ryan's hand. Dad, Linda is my fiancée. We are getting married this year. I walked up to the young woman and hugged her. Ryan, I'm becoming more and more confused. Will you explain to me how your friend became a secret agent and was able to help me so much? John joined the conversation. Dad, he always called me Dad, except in court, Sheila and Barb were very worried about you. They asked me to find out everything I could about Carly and her past. I didn't want to use our office, so I contacted Ryan. Ryan, what is your job? You're not a secret agent either, by any chance. Ryan laughed. No, Dad, I'm not a secret agent, and neither is Linda. I run a data center. This is the computer age, and you can find almost everything about anyone. John called and told him what was going on. Linda and I started checking Carly's background. And her family. We started to worry. We talked to John, and between the three of us, it was decided that Linda would become Carly's friend. She stayed with Eric when she was here. All she had to do was go to places where the Spanish congregated. She knew when to go because Carly always asked Sheila to look after the baby. Isn't it dangerous for Linda? I asked. Not so much. A couple of my Spanish friends came with me. People like Carly give all the hard-working Spaniards a bad name. My friends and I became friends with Carly, and she told everything. She was actually proud of what she did. We didn't think all three would be needed to testify, but they were ready if needed, Linda said. Dad, we didn't want to keep this a secret from you, but we needed enough evidence for the court to have the judge give you custody. When Linda found out about her second pregnancy, we decided to take action and reveal everything, but you already kicked her out, Ryan answered. Okay, thank you all, but whose idea was this? Sheila spoke. It was Aunt Barb's idea, Dad. She called for a family meeting while you were on one of your trips. She told us that you were lonely and that we weren't there for you like we should have been, and that we had to fix it. She said, better late than never. After Uncle Bill got sick, we all noticed that you were there for him. Even with what you were going through and what you were going through, you made time to see Uncle Bill at every opportunity. Sheila and Barb were both crying. I also cried, remembering my friend. Sandy, Barb, and Bill's daughter sat and listened. Uncle Jerry, after Dad died, we thought about Mom and what she would have to go through, and it scared us. It scared us a lot. We didn't want her to go through all that loneliness like you did. We decided that we would be nearby, but the most important thing is that she needs a real friend. Eric spoke. We all thought that Mary needed a woman in her life, a mother figure. There is no better mother than our mother. I can confirm that. Good thoughts, Eric, but don't you think it must have been your mom's idea? It was my idea. I just didn't know how to approach you. I love that little girl, Barb replied. Uncle Jerry, we all know about your pact with Dad to take care of each other's families. In fact, all of us kids make the same pact to take care of each other. Dad, Sheila spoke up. Every time I looked after Maria, Aunt Barb was there to help me. Look, Dad. Sheila looked at Maria, who was sitting on the floor again, playing with Dane. "Maria, where is Mom?" Maria smiled and crawled towards Barb. Barb had tears in her eyes again. "I still have big problems with Carly. She has visitation rights, and I need to decide whether to file charges against her. Then it will take time to get a divorce. I don't think Barb wants to go through all of this." John spoke again. "Dad, you said I was your lawyer, and I spoke on your behalf. Linda and I met with Carly and Carlos along with the judge after you left. Carly agreed to waive all rights regarding Maria. In return, we told her that we won't press charges for fraud. I think the thought of going to jail really scared her. Your divorce will be finalized in 60 days. You're still responsible for medical expenses for Carly and the unborn child. Of course, we checked with the insurance company, and you're not. You'll have to pay nothing out of pocket. Of course, you still have to pay off the credit bills that Carly ran up." "So, Jerry," Barb said, "looks like I'm free to babysit if that's what you want. I told the school I might only be interested in a substitute teacher job. I need to give them an answer next Monday. Are you going to live at my house, or should I bring Maria to you?" Eric spoke. "Uncle Jerry, Mommy won't just be a nanny and housewife. According to John, you can get married for the third time in 60 days. Adoption papers can be filed on Monday. We want you to know that if you marry Mommy, you will have our full approval and support. So you know, Mom told me all this." I looked at Barb, who still had tears in her eyes. I picked up little Maria from the floor and walked over to Barb, who was now sitting on the couch. "Barb, will you marry me in 61 days and become the mother of my daughter as soon as possible?" I can't believe I cried in front of everyone. There was dead silence. "For God's sake, answer him, Mom," Sandy screamed. "Yes, Jerry, of course I'll marry you, but I'm really glad you got the vasectomy," she smiled. I learned more about Carly's story from Linda a few days later. She told me that she had spoken to Carly many times. Carly and Carlos were really close friends and almost got married several times. Together, they deceived people. They did this for several years. Funny, I wasn't targeted. They actually got into an argument, and Carly actually hit Carlos' car with a tire iron. She got scared and hid in my truck. While we were driving to my house, she decided to tell her friends that she was going to use me. She mentioned to them that I had lost my wife and would be an easy target. When we arrived at my house, she saw all the things I had accumulated and decided to use me to get as much as possible. When she discovered she was pregnant, she became nervous. This was not something she was prepared to deal with. When I agreed to marry her, she really thought about being honest and staying married and starting a family. I guess the tiger doesn't change her stripes, and she's back to her old ways. Once I gave her the credit card, she used it to get another one without my knowledge. She made the minimum payments every month while she was sucking everything out of me. I asked Linda about sex. She didn't seem to be faking it. Linda said the sex was real. Carly was really enjoying herself. She was surprised that she liked it with an old man like me. Carly struggled with herself, using me, but when she talked to Carlos again, that settled the matter. She slept with him when we moved back to Texas. Of course, that's when their plans started to fall apart. Linda said I was lucky to have such a good family around me, otherwise I might have lost everything. People like Carly and Carlos used and deceived people as a way of life. She said they met their match when they contacted the Davis family. She was happy to be part of such a close-knit and loving family. Barb and I got married as soon as we could. The adoption went quickly, and Barb was now Maria's legal mother. I stopped working as a driver and got a job as a dispatcher. I was home every evening to be with my wife and daughter. Ryan and Linda got married and moved back to Ohio to be closer to the rest of our family. Linda told us she was pregnant and was really excited. She said that she would teach her child Spanish and Maria too, since they are both part Spanish. The last we heard about Carly and Carlos was that they had a son, and it was Carlos' baby. I hope they changed their ways. I felt sorry for their child. It was an evening in April when Barb said she took Maria to Sheila's so we could celebrate. "What are we going to celebrate?" I asked. Earth Day is one of those days you'll never forget, so I thought we'd make it our day from now on. We'll make real sense of it, Barb replied with a smile on her face. What's your big plan this time? Do you want me to take a gun, and we can kill a couple of birds? I laughed. Be kind, Jerry, she said, taking the blanket and my hand, and we walked into the backyard. Isn't it a wonderful evening, Jerry? Yes, it is. So, what's the plan? She spread the blanket on the ground and began to take off her blouse. You will love me on Earth every year on Earth Day. Who knows, maybe we will even make the Earth shake. I started taking off my pants and looked at Barb, who was already without her top. See, Jerry, Earth Day isn't so bad, is it? Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.